Good morning, everybody. They even got Highland cows here now at the farm, which is really nice. And did I mention they got meerkats as well? I think I did. Anyway, we had some really needed rain last night. All these fields, they need the rain. We had a beautiful day yesterday. It was like summer. And it's rained quite hard last night, so these fields will be will appreciate that. Come on, Jess. This is that wheat field. Wheat field. I love it because one way, this track, one way points directly to Malcott, and I think I've mentioned this before, but there was a genuine revival on Malcott many years ago called the Primitive Methodist Revival, and just working class people, God really touching their lives and utterly and completely transforming them, because Methodism of course was dead, and out of it came Primitive Methodism. It's funny, my granddad was a Primitive Methodist lay preacher, and my grandma was a Methodist, a Wesleyan Methodist I think. So they came from a slightly different background. So one way you've got Malcott, which if you like leads to a true revival, and the other way you've got one of the high churches in Congleton. It's more Catholic than probably Church of England. Interesting, eh? One path leads you to it's worth checking out the Primitive Methodist movement, because it was incredible. There's a great book called The Romance of Primitive Methodism. Hey, I've just had an idea, you know. That would make a really good walk. To go from the church there, St Mary's, which is, like I say, very high church, and walk right up to the top of Malcott Castle together. What a walk that would be. You know, you could actually go from... That church, by the way, has been around since something like 1100 AD. There was a... They reckon that they worshipped an ancient yew tree, not a yew tree, is it a yew tree? Yeah, I think it's a yew tree. An ancient yew tree there, and eventually they planted a church there. But so anyway, from there all the way up to there, we could stop at Brian and Diane's for some refreshments before we get to the top of Malcott Castle. Yeah, that'd be an interesting walk. Look at that there. To me, when I was growing up, that's what farms look like. Look at all the rusted equipment over there, just in the fields, just rotted. There's about 4 cars in that field, or there were. I don't know if they've taken them out for scrap, but they were just rotted away. When I was growing up, this is what farms look like. You look at farms today, and the kind of people that are running farms, I'm not sure I've come from a farming background. You know, you see them with all the latest cars and technology and stuff, but when I was growing up, this is what farms were like. My granddad and his brother ran a farm. They owned a farm jointly, so I spent a lot of my early years going up to the farm and running around in the hay stacks and fields, and I used to have this little moped that I used to bomb around on the fields with. But my granddad did the cows, and his brother did the other stuff, and anyway they split eventually, and my granddad took the milk round and his brother kept the farm, and that's how we ended up with a milk round. Now, we looked at 5 ways to avoid the destruction that's coming to Babylon. 5 ways. And the first was, if you looked, it was compromise, right? Compromise. and we looked at Lot pitching his tents towards Sodom and Gomorrah as the first stage on that journey to out and out idolatry and adultery, sexual immorality, and everything that you see in Sodom and Gomorrah. It starts by you pitching your tents towards it. Now, when we're talking about the subject of compromise, Satan always has a counterfeit, right? So his counterfeit for holiness is legalism. His counterfeit for holiness is legalism. What legalism does is accommodate pride. So there's no place for pride in true holiness. But legalism accommodates your pride perfectly. It has a place for our pride so that we can still show off in this pseudo-holy state. So when we're looking at compromise, the last thing that we want to become is legalistic. That's the last thing. The Lord doesn't want a legalistic bride, but he does want a holy bride. And really the secret to understanding the difference between legalism and holiness is just look at the life of Jesus. Just look at what he did. Look at everything that he did, and the examples of that. I love this part here, look. It's lovely. The farmer over there obviously lets people dock up along here. Anyway, here's the first question regarding compromise. How do we safeguard ourselves against compromise without becoming legalistic? How do we safeguard ourselves against compromise in our lives without becoming legalistic? Right, this is one of Jessie's favourite places. She likes to role play down here. Do you remember when you were young? I don't know if you can see this. There's two rope. Jess, I've just thrown you one. There's two rope swings here. What a perfect place, look, to have a rope swing. There's one on that branch and there's one on that branch. Absolutely fantastic. We used to play a game called knifey when we were kids. So we'd have a rope swing and you had a knife in your hand and you swung out, then you swung back and you put the knife in the ground as far back on the bank as you could. Then the next one would have to swing out, swing back, get the knife, swing out, swing back, and try and get it even further out, and that would go on until there was nobody left. There was a winner. Anyway, the second point is they're all huge, but it's huge, and that is the dangers of the flesh. The works of the flesh are evident. It says in Galatians chapter 5, the works of the flesh are evident. As I've said, they're evident to everybody but the person that's producing them. So, if you can in your group, find 3 scriptures that will describe to you and the group the very nature of the flesh. 3 scriptures which describe the very nature of the flesh. Come on, Jess. I'm going on to the golf course now, and this is where all the posh people in Congleton come to, including Uncle Bob. And he'd probably be here if he didn't have a bad back. But yeah, this is not a cheap golf course to play on, and I'm sure they're not that happy about the fact that it's got a public right of way running right through it, but it is what it is, and I actually really enjoy this part of the walk. Bluebells are going already, you know, this year, don't want to depress you folks, but this year is flying by, absolutely flying by. And I never got the, Diane was telling me about a walk that was just covered in a carpet of bluebells. Never got to do it. Isn't it funny, we end up so busy sometimes that just the small things in life we end up not doing. But this is a golf course. They don't like the dog being off the lead, but this is early in the morning So I'm hoping that they're not going to shout at me, and Jessie's really well behaved. I can bring her right to my feet normally. Wait. So yeah, if you like golf, my dad used to say that, and he used to play a lot of golf, but he used to say golf is a good walk spoiled. A good walk spoiled. It looks a great game, doesn't it? I used to play golf with Ernie Burton. Some of you'll know Ernie and Caesar. Caesar's the cousin of Tyson, and Ernie's Tyson's uncle. And used to play golf with Ernie, and he never took a practice swing. I've never seen anything like it. Typical Ernie Burton. Never took a practice swing. Just put the golf ball on top of the tee and looked to see where the flag was and just gave it one great big whack. you see all these other people, you know, wiggling the backsides and kind of, you know, adjusting the posture and all these things to try and, you know, get themselves into the right frame of mind, and all the practice swings, and then eventually they hit the ball. And they just put the ball on the tee and whacks it as hard as he can, and 9 times out of 10 it was a brilliant shot. That guy there has just produced an absolute worldie. He's hit a ball from over here, over all those trees, right onto the green. How nice is this here? Look at this here. They've got a little porter cabin, and they're building a kind of a Scandinavian style build over there. They've been at it, to be fair. They've been at it for all the time we've been here, so probably 18 months as far as I know, so it must be over 2 years then. So the next thing on the list is another biggie. They're all big ones, big ones. Next thing is hard times. Hard times will either send you one way or the other. So when you look at Demas, is a perfect example. Demas is mentioned in Pilgrim's Progress. When you look at Demas, there's 2 scriptures that tell you that Demas was a fellow worker with Paul, and clearly, you have to read between the lines a little bit here, but clearly he was, Paul rated him, he rated him, and you can feel it when he actually singles Demas out. He singles him out as, Demas has forsaken me for the world. Horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Now we know that at that point things had become very difficult, and Demas was in too deep, and he left him. He just. Now we see a similar thing with John Mark on the first missionary journey. John Mark turned around, and of course it caused Paul and Barnabas to have a huge row. But later on, John Mark proved that he was a true disciple, and towards the end of his life, Paul said, bring John Mark to me, he is useful to me. So I think there's a difference between John Mark and Demas. There's something about this decision, this choice that Demas made was final. You know, this was too much for him, and off he went. Anyway, Demas is a perfect example of what you call a stony ground Christian. So if you look in the parable of the sower in Matthew chapter 13, you see that there's different types of soil which represent different kinds of heart, character, heart. And the first kind of soil, the wayside, is somebody that the word doesn't even get in, doesn't even make an impact, and the birds of the air come and take it away. I think the second kind is the stony ground. And the stony ground Christian, Jesus said, is the Christian who the seed does go in, but it goes in between so many. There's so much stuff taking up the place that should be soil that the roots just can't dig in. They can't find a way. And what happens is when the sun reaches its zenith, and it's incredibly the heat of the day, which obviously speaks about hard times. Jesus says it speaks about hard times. In the hard times, the roots wither and the plant drops away. Then he talks about the thorny ground, and he likens the thorny ground to the cares of this world. That the cares of this world strangulate. So the seed goes in, but the cares of this world strangulate the seed. And then finally he describes the good soil, and he says the good soil is basically cultivated soil. Now, soil doesn't cultivate itself. It takes a plough, and you know, obviously in terms of the heart of a person, it's speaking of a person that's so in love with the Lord that they are prepared for their heart to be turned over by the convicting plough of both the Word of God and people. They plough you up, they plough your heart up, but ultimately it makes for the perfect condition for seed to grow. So the good soil ends up producing great fruit. And it's interesting to notice that not all good soil produces the same amount of fruit. There's different amounts. So that gives you a clue that there's different variations of all these things as well. Anyway, that was quite a long description, but describe in your group what kind of soil you think you are. Do you think you're like the wayside? Do you think you're like the stony ground? Do you think you're like the thorny ground? Or do you think you're like the good soil? Or do you think you're a combination of some? And like Demas, that, you know, shot up straight away when those hard times come. What do they do to you? What do they do to you? So have a think about that. What kind of a Christian are you? Soil by the wayside, stony ground, thorny ground, good soil. I try and walk this walk every day, and the last time I came up here I thought I must do one of the questionnaires here, because it's beautiful. Look at this field, folks. This is barley. Isn't it beautiful? Now, barley, particularly when the sun is setting on it, you get these golden, pink, red hues. It looks glorious, just glorious. Look at the abundance. Look at the sheer abundance in this field. Fertile ground or what? Look at it. It's amazing. And we are looking at the fourth way, if you like, that we can avoid being a part of those people that are judged at the end of time. And we looked at the fourth part, which is taken from Deuteronomy 8, which is a great warning about blessing. And you can see this in scripture. Sometimes blessing, this is so weird, blessing will reveal your heart. And we see in Deuteronomy 8. And just as much as hard times are a test, blessings are a tremendous test. How are we going to deal with it when God is blessing us? How are we going to deal with it when God is answering our prayers and God is giving us our heart's desire? How do we deal with blessing? And it is a test. It's a tremendous test. And Paul said, I have learned to be content. He learned not to get overexcited or messed up, whether he's on the mountaintop or in the valley. But blessing is a tremendous test. So here's the next discussion point. Has there ever been a time in your life where God has blessed you, and in that time in your life, it doesn't happen straight away, it really is subtle and it takes time, but in that time in your life you began to put God to one side and put other things in his place? How peculiar is that, eh? They obviously put some kind of weed killer down this row here because they want it segregated for some reason, maybe for when they harvest it. A place, isn't it beautiful that? The donkeys on there have got the special kind of donkey, but they have a cross on the back. You can actually see a cross on the back. They're called something. I know they're called donkeys, but they're called something else as well. This here, this is a field of hay. This is the first cut. The first cut this is, and they'll try and get three. They normally try and get 3 cuts off a field of hay if they can in one season, and it might not sound like a lot, but you know, but hay of course is very, very expensive now. It's amazing how many people don't know the difference between hay and straw. They get the two mixed up. So any farmers in the group, I know Anne will know. So on Sunday morning we looked at pride as the last of the 5 points, and the reason being is it will be the last thing to go in our lives. It is the sneakiest, can be the most vile. Pride is capable of the cruelest, horriblest things, slander, terrible, just. And the thing is with pride, I mentioned my friend on Sunday morning, Ant, and I mentioned the fact that Ant was just what I would call a humble guy by default. Not a Christian, but just a humble guy. And he had every right to be proud. He was, you know, when you're in your teens and you're going out and you're trying to find girls and all that, being good looking is a big thing. Well, he was the best looking of the bunch, but he also had the best personality of the bunch, yet he was the humblest of the bunch. And I've known this in life, that some people are just relatively humble. There's pride in everybody, but are relatively humble by default. By default. I mean, there's much more to Ant's story. When he came up to secondary school, they put him in the form for the most unintelligent people in the school. They'd got him down as a complete waste. There was, back in those days, they put all the wasters, if you like, in one form. It was very unfair, but that's what they did. And Ant rose out of that to all the top forms. So there's much more to that guy than what I said. But he just nothing ever seemed to go to his head. And some people are like that. They are naturally better at handling, at keeping their ego in check than other people. So for some Christians, it's not really that big a deal. For other Christians, it is enormous. And when you start to challenge the root problem, it's like dealing with a demon. So we're back to the start of the walk almost now. This is the very, very posh end of Congleton. That's the Asbury School. It's actually a Christian school of sorts. And here's the farm. And there on the grass over there, I don't know if you can see, is a maypole. So they're going to be dancing around the maypole. And interestingly enough, the church, you know, it's all part of the same thing. The maypole, the church, it's all tradition. And of course nobody really looks to think about what dancing around the maypole actually is, because these things are just put together. You've got this mixture of things that go back to Babylon mixed with a little bit of Christianity. You see, look, come and join us, looking straight into the graveyard. Come and join us. Look at that. Oh dear. So this is where I met Jordan. Goodness me, it's 18 months ago now. This is where I met him. Ashby Church. Beautiful church, isn't it? It's been around for 1,000 years, this church. Not this actual building, but how incredible. This yew tree here is 2,000 years old. 2,000 years old. They've had somebody come in and date the tree. That is 2,000 years old. And they say that they probably used to worship this tree before, this is what they say, before there was a church here, they probably worshipped the tree. So it was, that's the way it was. It would have been Druidism, wouldn't it? Where are you going, Jess? What's up with you? And this is the, oh no, I better not go on there because they don't want you to. But yeah, they've nicked all the stone. Yeah, there it is over there. There's a, it's really odd. Two graves to crusaders. Right, come here, I don't know what's up with you. Anyway, let's talk about pride for a bit. It's the last sin to go. I'm convinced of that. It's kind of like the sin behind every other sin. And it's the seminal sin. It's the sin that we see in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. It's the sin that started this whole thing off. It's pride. And it will be the last thing to go. And I think it's true to say that pride is dug in. It's dug in to the trenches of our heart like warfare. It isn't going to come out. It absolutely refuses to go. And there is this war between the new man and this horrible fleshly pride. It's horrible. You know, we can talk about Armageddon and this battle that's going to take place at the end of time, but I tell you, pride has its own Armageddon planned for our spiritual walk. It is incessant. It never stops. And the church, the bride of Christ, in these days is going to have to deal with pride. If we're going to move forwards, if we're going to see anything of any significance happen whatsoever in our lives, we have to deal with pride. We'll never fully deal with it, but we have to at least give it an enormous clout with a great big spade. The last discussion point then. If pride is so deceptive, and it really is so deceptive, then we're never going to own our own pride issues. We're not, because it's going to do everything. Pride is like a chameleon. It can blend itself into any background. If we're going to deal with pride, then really one of the only ways of dealing with it is having fellow Christians around you that love you, but love you enough to tell the truth. To tell the truth, to give some home truths. And it comes down in a way to accountability. Are the people around us that we will listen to? And like I said on Sunday morning, not just people on the internet, are the people around us that are there to keep us in check and stop us from becoming out of control in the area of pride. So just discuss this together, and I would definitely finish this session praying for one another, because all 5 of these discussion points are difficult. They're difficult, but the bride is going to make herself ready. Finally, please can we pray? These are immediate prayer needs. These are not all the prayer needs that we've got in our church by any stretch, but these are 2 immediate prayer needs in our fellowship at the moment. The first is Donna. Donna, I don't want to say how old Donna is, but she's a young lady. She's keeps herself as fit as a fiddle. She's a teacher in school. She's got a lovely husband, 2 lovely kids, and she's just been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. And thank the Lord, they've told her that it's treatable, but it's a life. When you hear that word, it's life-changing. And I'm just asking you, please, to pray for Donna, and particularly for her husband and the children at this time, and for the treatment to go well for her. The other immediate need is Kevin. Kevin was diagnosed, I think it was back in December, with cancer, and basically what they said to him was not good, but he's had a scan and stuff, and it's been absolutely ages with Kevin. So he's going to find out this Thursday what's the extent of the whole thing. Please pray for Kevin, and please pray for his wife Lynn, because Lynn has been struggling sleeping in the midst of all this. Listen folks, you know, when we're looking at these five areas, we have to remember in all this that the one that called us at the very beginning is helping us in every one of these. We're not doing this on our own. And I've said this before, I've got an electric bike on the back of the camper van. It's almost like pedaling an electric bike. You have to pedal, but there's external power there that's got nothing to do with you. And there's nothing in any of these 5 discussion points that through the Lord we cannot overcome. He says, be of good cheer. Be of good cheer, says Jesus, because I have overcome the world. Okay friends, I know that was quite a long session, but I wanted to take you on the circular walk. And we've come right back to the beginning, and there's Arthur. Home sweet home, our mobile tabernacle. And Mandy's just drying out some herbs. Not herbs, herbs. The Americans say herbs, don't they? Don't ask me what they are, but Mandy's drying them out. There's something, these are our local ducks. They come and sit here. They normally eat Jesse's food. That's it.